And would I do the same thing again if I was given a chance to do it all over? I don't know. I can honestly say that I don't know. But what I can say is that I don't have any regrets for the path that I've chosen because it teaches you a lot about yourself. Going on a research journey like this, many people will tell you that the personal development more than the academic development is huge. The person that I was before I started my academic journey is nowhere close to the person that I am now in terms of social development, personal development, just me as an individual. I was transformed by this journey. So I would definitely say that.
The future of material science lies in the manipulation of polymers at the molecular level.
I agree. I agree. So, firstly, polymers are materials that kind of constitute the bulk of products that we use in our daily lives. And there's always a push for materials that are more sustainable. And the way that we're going to get there is by designing new materials. And the way to design new materials is to understand them at a fundamental level. So the future is innovation from the fundamental science, which is, the molecules that make up these materials. So I definitely agree with that.
Okay, what exactly are polymers for people that don't know? So, from what I understand, it's not just plastics. What else is it?
So polymers comes from two words of Greek origin. So the first word is poly, which means many. I think many of us are familiar with that one, easy one. And mer means unit, coming from the word meros. So it means many units essentially. And fundamentally, most chemistry deals with single units and reacting those together to form a new compound, which can also be a single unit, so the transformation. Now, anything that kind of replicates itself on a structural level, that would be a polymer, because if you start with one unit, which is a unimer, and you add that unimer to itself, however many times, whether 5 times, 10 times, a million times, you end up with a polymer because you have many of the same unit added together to form this new compound. And you have different types of unimers that would give you different types of polymers, and those different types of polymers would have different properties, and the properties kind of dictates what you would end up using it for. And also how many of those units you add together also influences the properties that you get. So if you take the same unimer and you add it to itself, let's say 5 times, to end up with a polymer of 5 units, well, technically that wouldn't be classified as a polymer, but just to prove the point, if you have 5 units attached together, you'll end up with something that has certain properties. If you add 1,000 of those together, it just makes sense that you now have something different, although it's the same thing. On a fundamental level, you end up with different properties. So there's a vast myriad of materials out there that are composed of different units, different unimers, different mers, that would give us different materials, and also you have different lengths of those materials that would give us different properties. So plastics is just one example where you use unimers like ethylene to produce polyethylene, which is your plastic bags. Then you also have propylene, and when you add many of those together, you get polypropylene again, and that is your Tupperware containers, and things like that. You also have ethylene terephthalate. If you add many of those together, you end up with PET, or polyethylene terephthalate. That is your Coke bottles and things like that. But you also have a whole different field of polymers that deals with the biological side of things. So many of the polymers are also used in pharmaceutical applications, cosmetic formulations, During World War II, there was a polymer that was actually used as a blood plasma expander, on the battlefield to try and help save lives. So you can essentially design many different materials depending on what you start with and how you end up making the polymer with regards to the specific technique you use to make it, because there's also many of those, and also again like the length of the polymer that you can control. You would be hard pressed to find a material in your house that is not composed of a polymer.
Okay, I find it very interesting that you mentioned there's medical uses for polymers, especially now if you look at the online space. There's this big consensus that there's microplastics in everything and it's bad for your health. You shouldn't drink from plastic bottles because you don't know what impact it's going to have. What myths are there about it, and what is actually true?
So definitely it's true that microplastics are a thing, because whenever you use a polymer, there's always a chance of some abrasion or some physical phenomena that would happen that would lead to the breakdown of this material. So that is true. However, when it comes to moving away from polymers entirely, I don't think that that is something that is necessarily going to happen in the near future, because firstly, polymers are extremely ubiquitous. Like, you find them everywhere, and that is maybe why you find these microplastics everywhere, because essentially polymers are everywhere. And the reason why polymers are everywhere is because they are such a versatile material. Like, you could make so many different things using polymers. And the reason why that is the case is because it's extremely cheap. Polymers are very cheap. They last a long time, they are durable, and they're quite versatile. So, in order for us to move away from polymers entirely, you would need to find a material that would replace polymers in all of these different applications that it has. And that may be true, but at the same time, it needs to make sense financially, because there are many ideas out there that are viable on a theoretical level, but practically when it comes to implementation, the cost basis would not support that. So I understand, why people say that it's bad, and that may be one drawback of using it. But at this point, the advantages are just so much more than the disadvantages that we are currently being faced with. So polymers are not going anywhere for the foreseeable future. And also, um, now in this context, we're talking about plastics. Plastics are produced using essentially side products from the production of fuel from coal. So essentially, what you are doing is also taking some waste material from the synthesis of fuels and making something useful out of that. So if you want to move away from plastics entirely, then you kind of need to redevelop or reimagine what you are going to do with all of that raw material that is being used for polymer production. So it's not just about polymers itself, it's also about an entire value chain that the petrochemical industry, that is the backbone of the petrochemical industry. You would be hard pressed to find a petrochemical company that doesn't also have a division that makes polymers, because the main ingredient to make polymers is a side product from the production of fuels. So it's a complicated system, but at the end of the day, polymers are cheap. Polymers have a wide variety of applications. They last a long time. So if we're going to move away from them, we need to find an alternative solution that is capable of replacing it in all of these different applications, but it also needs to make sense financially.
Yeah, something like polymers has been used for so long. There's the idea of something being Lindy. The longer something has been used, the longer it is likely to be used. And there's a reason it has been used in the first place. And to replace it, I imagine, is going to be a monumental task, because there's the infrastructure in place, having to upend all of that, having to make all those changes. And it's not just making those changes, it's also changing people's minds as well, what the world will be like. Like, you can see it with plastic bags, for instance. People are so used, when they go to the shop, they buy what they need, they put it in plastic bags, Like, one issue people have predominantly now with shopping is the plastic bags are getting so expensive that it's a nuisance for them. There is reason for it, like environmentally,
Exactly.
but ultimately, that is a good example of how tough it'd be to change. Changing something as small as plastic bags has such a big impact on people. Imagine changing the whole infrastructure of the whole world.
Exactly. So it's nice to talk about it, like, yeah, we need to move away from it. But are you actually implementing that in your daily life? Are you refusing to buy any Tupperware products? When you go to the shopping store, do you go with your own bags with you? Do you buy the reusable ones that they have there? Do you go with your own plastic bags? So it's kind of virtue signaling in a sense, because we all, and the social um, perspective that's being pushed on us is that we need to move away from it. But is that really coming from the people on the ground? Because when you go to the store, you buy plastic bags, you buy Tupperware products. So is this a top-down approach or a bottom-up approach? But at the end of the day, it's not going anywhere. And there are initiatives in place to move more towards a circular economy. And that, I think, has more viability than moving away from plastics entirely, for the reasons that we just mentioned, because they're not going anywhere. So most of the plastics end up in landfills. And that's where the degradation happens. That's where the microplastics get into the water, and that's how it ends up in our bodies and all of that. So if we can find a way to stop the just the accumulation of polymer waste at landfills, we are one step closer. And there are initiatives in place. There are many companies that are working on technologies that takes all of these waste um, carbon material, which is plastics are based on carbon. So it takes waste carbon material and it can turn it into valuable products again. So in that way, instead of moving away from plastics, once the plastic has reached its end use, we can then repurpose it. Either by physical methods like transforming it into something else, or by taking that and converting it into something new via gasification. And that is currently in the works. There are companies who have initiatives in place for that. So we are moving closer towards, dealing with plastics in a more environmentally favorable manner.
Okay, you mentioned moving to a circular economy. What is that?
So right now, plastics are being produced, they are being used, and then they end up in landfills. So that's where the life cycle of the plastic ends. So if we want to close the loop, we can then take that waste material, convert it into something that can be used again and possibly again and again and again. So we want to close the loop, make it circular so that we don't necessarily have to deal with the microplastics, or rather mitigate it to an extent, because the polymer material itself is carbon. The coal that we use to make our petrochemical products is carbon. The natural gas that we use to make our petrochemical products is carbon. So we need a carbon source. And if we can find a way to harness, the carbon potential of waste plastics, then it's an alternative feedstock to produce valuable products like our petrochemical products and various others as well. So that's what I mean when I say circular. It's that the plastic is not just used once, or rather the carbon that is used to make the plastic is not only used once, but it can be reclaimed and repurposed and reused again.
So, what are the challenges with reusing plastic? Because I imagine if it was as easy as just, melting it again and then putting it in a furnace, passing it into a mold, reshaping it, it would just be done currently. So, what is inhibiting it from happening now?
So currently, when it comes to repurposing waste plastic, one, I can say, probably the biggest potential impediment to that is that the more you use, so the more cycles this plastic goes through in terms of repurposing, the more you have a deterioration in the physical products. So the physical properties. So there's a limit to how many times you can, repurpose it. So for instance, if you take a Tupperware bucket, and then you melt it down and you remold it into a new product again, that new product, the physical properties you would have lost some of the physical properties just because, of the process that it has to go through again, because in order to mold it into a new product, it has to be exposed to intense pressures, intense heat. So every time the material goes through that process, it loses some structural integrity. And eventually you get to a point where the material properties is not sufficient for the use case anymore. So there's definitely a limit to the number of times you can repurpose a plastic, but essentially you can do it. And there are also initiatives in place to do that. And the other part of things, instead of now reuse, we're talking about converting this into a raw material again. Again, you need the technology that is capable of doing that. So the bottleneck is with regards to the technological development of turning waste plastics into a renewable feedstock again, and also the capital constraints that goes, into those kind of developments. So I would say that's the two bottlenecks, because I mean, if you want to do this on an industrial scale, it takes a huge amount of effort and money to do that. And companies aren't really incentivized, to do that, because going that route may be more expensive. And at the end of the day, companies are going to move with regards to, what impacts their bottom line. So a lot of government intervention would probably be necessary here to incentivize and subsidize companies to invest into these types of projects. So those are the two reasons.
Speaking to that, whenever you make a certain change, the alternative has to be as good, if not better. A good example is with cars. Like, there have been hybrids for so long, there have been electric cars for some time. I mean, the Prius was seen more as a niche car, but then Tesla came with their cars, and it wasn't just better than the Prius, it's even better than normal cars in many aspects. You have to actually make it more enticing to make the change, because everybody knows what is currently being used. Like, we're familiar with the petrol engine, diesel engine, but we're not familiar with electric cars. So it has to be so enticing that, in spite of all this, how daunted we feel by making the change, we make it because we see in the end it's going to be beneficial for us.
At the end of the day, the customer decides, where the future is moving towards. So if we come up with an alternative and people are not buying it, or it becomes more expensive, then what do you do? So there's this interplay between innovation and also what the consumer is willing to pay for, how much they're willing to pay for it, if they're willing to pay for it at all. So although you are presenting them with what may seem like a better solution or a better alternative, it needs to make sense for the consumer. So you need to first understand what is it that people will buy, what is it that they will gravitate towards, and then I think you need to work up from there, because you can have the best product and now you're coming to the market and nobody wants it. Does that mean that it's a good product? I took some courses on entrepreneurship while I was at university, and something that they always stress is that before you scale up something, you need to have product market fit, which means whatever product it is that you are trying to sell, that there is a market for it and that it fits in that market. And also, before you scale up, you also need to have an MVP, which is your minimum viable product. So a product that is, let's say, version one of what you intend to sell, a scaled down, low cost version of that, and seeing if people are actually willing, to buy it. And if you are successful in that, then you have product market fit, and then you can move forward. But what I see happening is, we have all of this perspectives coming from the top and saying to the customer, no, this is what you need, instead of really getting down into the grassroots and determining what people actually want and what people need, and then moving towards that. The Prius could be an amazing car, but if the customer wants, an engine that really sounds like it gets your heart racing. Why would they want something that you are telling them is good, but I don't find enjoyment in driving? So there's a lot of factors that goes into this for sure.
Yeah, it's a bit of a catch 22 because one of the keystones of innovation is creating and delivering something that people don't know they need yet. And there's an idea by Naval Ravikant that I like that speaks to it. It's start small and try and find what works. And then once you have something that works that you can deliver upon repeatedly and reliably, then you scale it up. And like a good example is Facebook. Facebook started off very small. Like it was just a bunch of guys trying to get dates in university, trying to create a network so they could easily get in contact with women, basically. And then they scaled it from there and it became the global sensation that it is now. And the same with any technological innovation. It's you can ask people what they need so you see where they are struggling. And it doesn't necessarily mean them telling you. You can observe it, for instance, in your own experience, like Airbnb. They wanted to go on this trip and they didn't have money for it. So then, well, what did they do? They rented out their own space. And from there, they saw this opportunity. They saw that there would be people like them and they're the same thing. So, in the modern world, or particularly in the online space, it seems like people are incentivized more to have certain views and ideas, but not act on them. You know, bringing it back to the space of environmentalism, there are so many people that are social justice warriors online saying all of this is bad for the environment and XYZ and so on. But there's very few people going into the research space, going in to go and study so that they can actually do something about it. And you've gone and taken that journey to go and study science, which doesn't seem like the most glamorous thing in the world. If you look online, there's not much visibility of it. What inspired you to pursue this career path?
What inspired me to go down this career path that I've chosen? I think it was mostly just pursuing what I love. And I love chemistry. And when I finished my undergraduate degree, I then applied to do my honors degree. And that's where everything kind of pivoted towards my love for research, because during undergrad, everything is mostly taught modules, you write tests and exams, and you get a mark, and you move on with your life. And but then when I got to my honors degree, there was a research component to that. So for the last 6 months of my honors degree, I had this project that kind of gave me creative freedom to be able to solve this problem that I was given, and I needed to come up with a solution to that. So that was the first spark of my love of research when it came to chemistry, because I knew that I liked chemistry as a subject, but now I was exposed to the research side of things. And when I finished my honors, because it was only like a 6 month research project, I kind of wanted more. Like what's the term for it? But I fell in love with research at that point. Then I decided to do my master's degree, and that was fully research based. So for 2 years, I had a research project, and I had to go into the lab every day and figure out how we are going to get closer to either proving or disproving whatever hypothesis that we came up at that point. And the funny thing about research is the more you do experiments, the more you get information, the more the question that you're asked initially changes. The more the aims changes, the more objective changes. So although you start off with a certain research project and a theme, most likely what you end up with is something that is probably still within that niche, but not what you thought it would be. Because in the pursuit of this new knowledge, you came across, more knowledge that informed your original hypothesis or your decision. So I really enjoyed that process of continuous learning. And when it comes to research, like you don't have any more modules, so you don't have any more taught courses. So you kind of have to take your further learning into your own hands. So if you want to learn, something additional, you have to actually go out there and you have to go and read. So there's a lot of independence associated with that. Nobody is going to dictate to you what things you should be reading, what experiments you should be doing. It's essentially in your hands. And some people, they flourish in that. And I was one of those. I really enjoyed it. And because there was some level of success with my master's project, I then decided to do a PhD. I never really considered anything outside of just my love for the science that I'm doing. And I wouldn't necessarily prescribe this path towards everyone because you need to also be mindful of where you're going to end up when all is said and done. But I didn't necessarily look at it that way. I just wanted to do more research. I loved it. And I kind of was given the opportunity in my PhD to kind of formulate where I wanted the project to go because in a master's project, not really much is required of you. You just need to prove that you have the capability of doing research. When it gets to your PhD, now you actually need to do research and produce something. You need to have a contribution towards your scientific field. So in my undergrad, my second major was biochemistry. But when I got to honors, you're just focusing on one of your majors. So my honors was in chemistry, but my undergraduate was a double major, chemistry and biochemistry. And I really like biochemistry as well. And then when I got to the PhD, I wanted a project that has a chemical aspect to it, but also a way for me to incorporate some of the biochemistry that I learned back in my undergrad. So again, I enjoyed research. I enjoyed what I learned in my undergrad, and now I'm doing that for my PhD. And it worked out for me in the end. I was able to get a job afterwards. I liked what I was doing. I had some good um, results for my PhD. And would I do the same thing again if I was given a chance to do it all over? I don't know. I can honestly say that I don't know. But what I can say is that I don't have any regrets for the path that I've chosen because it teaches you a lot about yourself. Going on a research journey like this, many people will tell you that the personal development more than the academic development is huge. The person that I was before I started my academic journey is nowhere close to the person that I am now in terms of social development, personal development, just me as an individual. I was transformed by this journey. So I would definitely say that the path that I am on has kind of morphed me into the person that I am now. So I am grateful for that. And would I prescribe it to others as well? I don't know. It depends on your personality. If you have a keen interest in wanting to know how the world works, if you always have interesting questions, and then I would probably say that you can do that. But if you're a more systems based person who, you're used to doing things the way things are, have always been done, you like following certain protocols, then probably not. There are other structured masters and PhD things that you can do. So there's different ways to go about it. You can either choose to do a structured or a course taught MSc or PhD, or you can do one that is research based. So that's kind of another distinction that also should be made.
Okay. And again, looking online at examples people are exposed to and who people will typically have as role models in a modern world, it seems to be centered, centered on this idea of hustle culture, where it's forget about going and studying further. That's a waste of money, it's a waste of time. Focus on just starting a business, making as much money as you can as soon as possible. Whereas, the more traditional approach is more a slow life approach, like developing the skills, building yourself up, and focusing on learning skills that will benefit society. What do you make of this approach, so you've gone all the way, done your PhD, you're now officially Dr. Randy Cunningham. You could have stopped along the way. What inspired you to go all the way, and what do you think of this idea that people preach that you don't need to go study, you can just go straight into the working world, make your money, or start your own business?
Look, the path that I chose is definitely not the only one out there. There are many different paths that you can take. You can do your undergraduate degree, you can get a job, honors get a job, masters get a job. You can get off the train at any given point. It just depends on you. You even have the choice of going to university in the first place, you know. But when it comes to this idea that you don't necessarily need an education, that is probably something that I'm not all the way on board with. You know, as much as you're going to school and you're going to university and you are being taught by someone, you still have to take the learning into your own hands, you know, and you can do that by going to university, or you cannot go to university. You can maybe go to a technical college, you can sit at home with the textbooks yourself, you can do your master classes. If you just have the drive to learn something, to learn a skill, and you have the means to be able to apply that in the real world, then I think you'll be okay. University is not necessarily the only path, college is not the only path, but I would say that, I mean, we come from neighborhoods where you see people who have dropped out of school, who have dropped out of university, who are just around and their lives are not necessarily materializing into anything. And I would also like to kind of see the statistics with regards to the success rate of people and the level of education to see if there's a correlation there. Because there are so many people who have dropped out of school or dropped out of university who have just fallen by the wayside. And education, I think, is probably the number one deliverance of people from poverty. You know, you obviously you do have your outliers of people who dropped out of school, who dropped out of university, and who have made it big in life. But are those people really a representation of what would happen if you do that? You know, it's not impossible for you to make a huge success of your life without going via these traditional methods of education. But if we had to sit down and be honest and ask which one has the highest chance of probability of becoming a success, you could go to school, do the traditional route. I don't have anything against that. If you really feel like school is not for you and you're not made to be within that system, and you have a drive to do something outside of school and you are really committed to do that, then go for that as well. But if you're just going to drop out of school and say that this is not for me, but then do nothing at all, then really the future is bleak. But I think everyone needs to have a sense that their life, you know, and the outcomes of their future is in their own hands. And it's what you make of it. So if you go to school and you apply yourself as much as you can, you know, things will probably work out for you. And if you decide to start a business along the way and you actually give your all to that, you will most likely end up becoming successful, because even though your business fails, if you were really committed to that as much as you said you would, it wouldn't necessarily hold you back, because there's many lessons in most of the failures that we go through. So hustle culture does have its place, education does have its place, um, following your passion above education does have its place. You just need to ensure that whatever outcomes that you are dealt with in life, that you are okay with that, because your life is in your own hands. You are the only person who's responsible for how your life is going to turn out. And whatever decision you make, you need to be okay with the consequences of that decision. So that's my take on that.
Yeah, there's also an element of risk mitigation, It's not to say that you go and you study that everything's going to be a given, or if you start a business that it's a given it's going to fail if you do not have the skills. But you increase the likelihood of success by, taking the time, developing the skills, and the work you put in, how diligent you are about everything. There's stuff that you do to set the odds in your favor. It's who is it again? I don't remember his name. The golfer. The name's not coming to me. But he always said, luck. You become more lucky as you practice more. That's basically the essence of it. And it's the more you do everything that it takes to make sure that you're prepared when the opportunity comes, that you can um, pounce on that opportunity to the best of your capabilities, the more likely you're going to succeed in that space. And, even if you go and you decide you start the business and, you have this where you might have success early on, or academically, for instance, as well, where you start off your degree and you super motivated and you're like, I can't wait to change the world, to have this impact and all of that. But it is sort of a marathon. It's something that takes perseverance and persistence. And in your case, going and studying all the way to your doctorate, it's a long journey, A lot of people look at it when they're just starting out and they already calculating in their mind, it's going to be 3 years for my undergrad. And they like, oh, that already seems too long for me. Now, add the undergrad 3 years, then honors 4 years, masters another 2 years, and then doctorate another 2 or 3 years. It can be 8 or 9 years. So, what kept you going through this journey?
Definitely, man. When I started my undergraduate journey, we were a lot in the class. Like, undergraduate classes are packed. Oftentimes people have to sit on the sides. There's not enough space for everyone. And one of our lecturers, he told us that the likelihood of everyone in here passing is extremely low. Probably only about 30 or 40% of everyone in this room will make it to the end and graduate. But everyone had the qualifications to be there. In order to get into a good university, in a good science program, you need to have good marks, relatively above average high school marks. So everyone, that huge class, everyone was qualified to be there. But statistically, based on historical results, he told us that only about 30 or 40% of us would graduate towards the end. So now then you would ask, what is it that determines the percentage of people that pass? What are the determining factors for that? Because if everyone in here is smart, everyone here needed to be smart enough to get here. What are the other factors that are getting in the way of the majority of us not making it to the end? And that is your level of determination. Because as much as the statistics are saying that 30% of you will make it to the end, those are not good odds. So you need to ask yourself, okay, if only 30% of us are going to make it to the end, how can I increase the likelihood of that being me? So I'm going to party a little bit less. I'm going to study a little bit more. I'm going to pay more attention. I'm going to ask questions. There's all these things you can do that will allow you to increase the likelihood of you being part of the people who pass. And the reality is that not everyone is going to be willing to do that. And that is why you see a discrepancy between the number of people that enter university and the number of people that leave successfully. Now, some people may take 3 years, they may take 4 years, they may take 5 years, but they'll get there eventually. So you need to decide how hard you are going to work towards the thing that you said you are going to do. Because when we all register and we apply for university, we are saying that we want to leave this place with a degree. So, does your work ethic complement the goal that you set out initially? That is what determines whether or not you'll pass, whether or not you'll fail. And even if you fail your first two, three, or four tests, that's not the end of the world. How do you navigate failing and pulling yourself back up again? Because most people who go to university would have failed a test or an exam. That's just how it goes. But it teaches you to fail gracefully, and it also reminds you that there's so much more work that you can do. You can always improve. So the probability of you achieving what you set out to do initially lies within the work and how much hours you are willing to put in. That's it. There's no secret recipe, there's no secret sauce, and that applies all throughout, whether it's going to be your honors, your masters, your PhD, it's the same thing. Whether you are at work, it's the same thing. If you want a promotion, are you willing to work hard enough in order to get there? So, the thing that made me want to go all the way, I also looked kind of at I looked at a lot of the companies in the chemical and the petrochemical industry within South Africa. And a lot of the people who were like your vice presidents, the people in essentially running the company from a managerial perspective, a lot of those people had PhDs. And I told myself that I don't want to end up with a degree or go to university for such a long time, only to be stuck at a certain level. My ambition necessarily wouldn't allow me to be comfortable with just being there. I wanted to be exceptional at whatever it is that I was doing. So I thought, if I'm going to work one day and I want to work my way all the way up to the top of the pinnacle or how far I can go within this company, I need to give myself now an edge. So I thought that that edge would be getting a PhD, differentiating myself from everyone that I would find myself competing with. Because if we go to university and we are all in the same undergraduate class, we all have the same degrees. Your marks doesn't necessarily determine much once you leave university. So if I'm competing with everyone in my undergraduate class, and all of them have the same degree that I have, how can I level up so that when I'm competing with them, I stand out? Okay, let me do an honors degree. Now the class gets a little bit smaller, but now you ask yourself in honors, okay, how can I give myself an edge above these people that I'm competing with? Okay, let me do a master's, let me do a PhD. And that's how I ended up where I was. I have and I had high ambitions, and whether that's going to play out, only time will tell. But that's where my mindset was at. I wanted to be the best at whatever it is that I was doing. And we'll see how the cards fall. Even if I don't end up there, I genuinely enjoy what I'm doing. And that I think is more important, than any accolade or any position. Just finding peace in knowing that this thing you have dedicated your life to, there is some meaning in that.
Yeah, it sounds like an approach where it's shoot for the stars, and even if you miss your mark, you will still be among them. You'll still be a lot further than you would have if you had not decided, you know what, this is my ambition. I want to aim for that. And, the magic that you're looking for is in the work that we mostly know we should be doing. Like, a lot of success is not necessarily attributed to a lack of will, it's a lack of effort, it's a lack of diligence. Um, there's an expression by James Clear that I like, and it's consistency doesn't guarantee you will be successful, but I can guarantee you won't be successful if you aren't consistent. And it's constantly doing everything that you know you need to do. Like, if you want to build muscle, you have to go to the gym regularly. Like, there's no secret formula. Like, the most fundamental thing, if you look at all the Mr. Olympias, are they doing anything special? Honestly, they eating healthy, they training regularly, and they sleeping well. That is it. Like, people might say, oh, but they're on all these PEDs and stuff. There are so many people in any gym that are on PEDs, and I can assure you, they don't look like they're on it. That is one of the biggest insults you can say to somebody. You clearly don't take steroids. So, bringing it back to doing the work that you need to do, you know, it's very easy to come up with excuses as well. Have this victim narrative that I'm not in a space where I need to be because of X, Y, Z. But in spite of whatever situation we are, The impetus lies on us to take accountability for it. Whether you got hurt or in an accident or whatever it is, it doesn't change the fact that you are in that situation. You're going to have to deal with the consequences of it. You're going to have to do something for your benefit as well. Um, and in terms of like deciding what is the thing you want to work on, you know, how did you decide specifically that it is polymers? Because there are so many other things you can do that tie into the space of curiosity, you know. So for me, I'm studying psychology because I'm curious about knowing how people work, what goes on in people's minds, trying to understand people and be empathetic. What inspired you to go into polymers specifically?
Um, Specifically, polymers, it wasn't necessarily my decision. So, polymers is a subdivision, it's a niche within the broader field of chemistry. And all I knew what I wanted to do was chemistry. Now, at that point, I only knew about the big branches in chemistry, which is your organic synthesis, that deals mostly with carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, your organic compounds. Then you had your inorganic chemistry, which deals with metals, like your platinum, your aluminium, things like that. Then you also had physical chemistry, which deals more with the physics of chemistry. So explaining, using math, why certain things are likely to happen, why certain things are more stable than others, basically explaining why the things that you observe, whether it would be in inorganic or inorganic, are actually happening. Um, and then at that point, after my undergraduate degree, that's when I got a bursary. And the bursary was kind of suggesting to me that I should go into polymer chemistry because they have a polymer division and they kind of envision me fitting in on that side of the company. So I was like, I have been funding my university studies using NSFAS loans at this point, and if I'm going to continue with my undergraduate degree and I'm getting an opportunity now to do that, and I'm also being funded for that, who am I to complain? Like, I'm going to be able to study further and I'm going to have people funding it. So I did some research on polymer chemistry, and I was like, yeah, this looks cool. That was it. I was like, this looks cool, and then that's where I went. So it wasn't necessarily my decision to do polymers, but along the way, I had the decision of opting out of polymers. But I chose to rather continue within that vein because I enjoyed what I was learning and what I was doing. So you will never really know for sure that the thing you are doing is what you're going to be enjoying the most or what it is that you're going to end up liking the most. You just have to start somewhere. So I started in high school because I liked physics. Physics, I liked it and it led me to chemistry. I liked chemistry and chemistry led me, to polymer science. I never would have imagined that that's where I would have ended up. But the most important thing is just deciding to do something. Because even if you don't end up liking that thing that you ended up choosing, you have more information, and that is more than what you had when you started. And in doing so, you eventually figure out your path and where you end up going. So the worst thing you can do is to do nothing, because you don't end up with new information. But if you start off somewhere and you do something, you end up at a point later on in your life with more information, and that information will guide your next decision. And it never ends. That's how life goes. So I didn't choose polymer science. I ended up in polymer science because of all the decisions that I have made that led me to that point. And I'm happy that that's where I ended up because I led with what I enjoyed doing. And that is what guided my decision making process. So choose something that you enjoy, start somewhere, and do something. And as time goes on, You'll either realize that that thing you thought that you liked, you actually don't like, which is still a win, or that you are now confirmed in your belief that this is what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, there's profit in all labor. Even if the value you get out of doing something is not what you necessarily hoped for, just in the act of doing something, you get information. That information in itself is valuable. When you do something you don't love, you get information. You discover that's not what I enjoy. So that's what I should avoid. That in itself is invaluable. And there's this idea in Jordan Peterson's book. It's be precise in your speech. Now, it's not just about the way you speak, it's the way you articulate your thoughts, the way you look at the world. And when you do not try something, you have this fog that you always in the presence of, where everything is non-descriptive. You don't really know something, you don't really understand it. It's just this convoluted mess of, well, I might like that, I could do that, or whatever. But when you walk in the forest, you start seeing all the trees, you start making sense of the landscape. As you walk down the path, you start seeing the branching paths. So, where before, if you think when you walk down the road, you'll see the horizon and you have a vague understanding of what it is like there at the end. But as you get closer to that point that you saw on the horizon, you start seeing all the details in the building, you start seeing everything. It starts making more sense to you. So, for yourself, what evolution what evolution have you seen within yourself as you've gone along your journey from undergrad to postgrad? How has your perception of yourself changed?
I think the biggest change in myself that I have observed is that when I started off on this path, say after high school, everything was, how can I put this? As I progressed in my journey through life, I began to look at the world more objectively. That is ultimately what I can say is the biggest improvement in my life going through this. At first, I used to make decisions and look at the world, and my perspectives would always be personal. You would take a lot of things personally, whether that be from other people or from the world or wherever. But as I began to experience the world more, whether that be through work or through relationships or through friends, I developed this perspective of objectivity, in that things are not necessarily happening to me, but that things are happening. And the way that I move forward is how I choose whether or not to interact with that in a positive way or in a negative way. So you can always find a reason to find something offensive. You give permission to the things that offend you. So just being objective in life, that everyone is going through their own journeys. They probably don't mean it personally. Don't what's the word? Don't attribute to malice what you can attribute to ignorance. There's all these kind of things in life that are just happening, and they are not happening to you. It's life. And the way you choose to interact with that will determine a lot about your mental space, where you're going in life, the ability to look at the world objectively, knowing your place in it, and moving forward with that perspective. That to me was the biggest change, man. It's almost as if I can't pinpoint it, but there was a time where the light bulb just went off. And I can't trace it back to any given moment. It has just been the amalgamation of everything that has happened that led to that point. Like when you look at yourself like 3, 4, 5 years ago, you're like, at that point, I thought I knew so much, you know? But now it's like, it's so different. Like now you know that you actually don't know anything at all. And that kind of bestows on you a certain level of grace. It's amazing. It's amazing, man. And I don't know how you can teach that to someone. I don't know. It's something you have to come to on your own. I don't know. I really don't know. But that to me was the biggest change.
Yeah, it is amazing to see changes like that within ourselves. It's a testament to your growth, because if you had to, yeah, if your younger self had to see you now, would you want them to look and see and be like, oh, I have not changed at all? You want your younger self to look on upon you with pride. You want to be able to look back and be like, yeah, I've come a long way.
Exactly. Exactly. You know, something that I always remind myself is whenever I'm looking at my life and the things that I'm doing, and I look at where I want to be in the future, whether that be personally, career wise, or wherever the case may be. Like I always ask myself, am I acting in a manner now that will increase the likelihood of me becoming the person that I want to be? You know, and that puts things into perspective because a lot of the times where I'm feeling as if, hey, I don't really want to go to the gym now because I'm tired and I don't feel like it. And then I look at myself in the future and I'm like, if this becomes a habit of me skipping the gym, it is not a future that I would like to come to fruition. So, in order for me to avoid that future, I need to do something now that is going to increase the probability of the future that I want to play out become a reality. So, it's just a complete mindset shift that has happened over the past years.
Yeah, and it's that way. If you extend the time horizon, it puts things more into perspective. Extending the time horizon makes you realize that things that you think are so detrimental likely aren't as bad as you think they are. But also, if you extend the time horizon, it also makes clear the consequences of your repeated actions. Like you said, not going to the gym once doesn't seem that bad now in the moment. But if you're doing it repeatedly and you extend the time horizon and you see how it's going to look, you realize, oh, it's actually a lot worse than I initially thought.
Exactly. It's but delayed gratification. You know, you, you can either get that pleasure now by being lazy and just being home, or you can get it later, where it is now exponentially um, much more. And it comes down to the other question that you asked about. People will see the path that I've been on and be like, "Wow, it took you 10 years to finish school. 10 years is a long time. Like, I don't necessarily want to do that." I mean, 10 years time, 10 years is going to pass anyway. 5 years is going to pass anyway. So the time is going to pass regardless of what you are doing. So what's the alternative? In 5 years from now, are you going to wish that you did that thing that you wanted to do back then? So, like you say, increase the time horizon, evaluate your actions, and then determine if that is a future that you want to bring into reality, because that's the power we have at the end of the day.
People from the outside would look back and they would look like, let's say somebody doesn't take action that they wish they did. They would look back and they'll think 5 years on, why did I not do that? I should have just done it that. And it's constantly shifting the goalpost. Like making an excuse, I will start this next year, I'll do it next week or whatever. It's constantly shifting that decision, Making a decision, I want to do something is not the same as making the decision. Saying I'm going to start gym on Monday is not the same like going to gym on Monday. Only once you actually do the action have you made the decision actually. Everything until that is just mental masturbation.
Yeah, you're more likely to regret not doing something than actually doing it.
Yeah, and from the outside, like people only see the success once you make it. Like nobody's looking at when you're in that space where you maybe feel like you're suffering through everything, when you're doing your PhD, for example. No, people don't see the nights when you are battering your brain, trying to make sense of everything, trying to come up with a solution. They only see the end outcome. They don't see everything that it took to become who you are and what you do.
At the end of the day, everything that you are going to do in life is going to require some level of sacrifice. You know, going to school is hard, but also being at home and being unemployed and being depressed is also hard. Like you just need to choose your hard and be comfortable with it. That's it. There's no easy path to anywhere. This path that I'm on, anyone could have done it. It's just about willing to do the work. And it's difficult. Behind every successful venture or every successful person, every successful action is all of those times of doubt, of hardship that nobody sees. And that is where the secret lies in your ability to take on and do hard things. That is probably the biggest determinant of whether or not you will become successful.
Yeah, and speaking to that, where people only see the accolades, they don't see all the work it took to acquire it. How has people's perception of you changed since, you know, now that they can call you doctor? Like, have you seen a change in the way people treat you when you introduce yourself as Dr. Randy Cunningham versus Mr. Randy Cunningham?
I still introduce myself as just me. I don't put the title there. Um, I don't know what it is, but it's just the ability to relate to people on a human level because as soon as you lead with titles and accolades and things like that, it kind of can come off as a little bit of obnoxious. And also, people tend to, like you mentioned, they interact with you differently once they realize that maybe you have a certain level of status, money, power, whatever it may be. People's perception of you influences how they deal with you. So I always want to be able to relate to people on a human level. So I would never lead with, no, this is me, Dr. Such and such. It's me. If you go and look on my Instagram or my Facebook, you won't see anything about me graduating from my bachelor's, honors, master's, whatever. On LinkedIn, it's there because that's the platform kind of for professionals and stuff like that. But the majority of people that I interact with outside of work, they probably don't know because I haven't made that information public. And that is on purpose because I want to be able to interact with you and the real you. I don't want to know that the way that you have interacted with me now is because you regard me in a certain status level. So it definitely does change how people interact and view you, the same way as going to the gym. Once people see the results of your hard work, they give you a certain level of treatment that is now different to where you were before. People will see you, and then their first comment will be about your body. And at that point, you don't even want to talk about that. You just want to be say hi, how you talk about normal stuff, you know. So that's where I'm at with it. It's very awkward for me to do that where I lead with achievements. I want to be able for you to get to know me beyond what I have done, but as a human being and relate on that level.
Is it something that concerns you when you speak with people or you meet new people that they only see you for, yeah, for your status and not for who you are as a person? So they see you for your title or whatever it is you have.
I mean, this it's good and bad. At the end of the day, you worked hard for it, and you kind of deserve the recognition that comes, with your achievements in life. But that shouldn't necessarily be the basis for how someone treats you. We are all human. We all deserve to be treated with a certain level of respect, and I don't necessarily appreciate um, someone being nice to me just because of what I've done. You know, I want to be able to connect on a human level where we can have a conversation, where we can joke about silly things. You know, I'm someone who likes jokes. I'm a very silly and goofy human being. And if I have to lead with these are my qualifications, automatically people are not going to view me as this goofy, silly person. They're going to be like, oh, professional, like respect and all of that. And that is the furthest thing from the truth. I like making jokes. I like speaking to people about the most random things, about the most serious things, anywhere in between. That's what I enjoy doing. So to lead with my qualifications, there's obviously a time and a place for those things to be known. But for the most part, you'll eventually realize that there's more to me than just the jokes and all of that, that there is some substance, there is some knowledge, there is some wisdom. So everything will reveal itself eventually if you just be authentic to who you are.
Yeah, it's one of the, those fundamental human desires for others to see us as we see ourselves. That we do not feel the need to hide certain aspects of us, that in spite of all of this, people see us at the core. They see what is underneath all of this exterior. Um, yeah, and in terms of being authentic and having people see you, there's an element of it that also requires you to be honest about who you are and vulnerable. And if there's something that bothers you, or let's say, yeah, being honest about who you are, what is bothering you, how do you navigate that? So something I see in, especially in like the STEM fields at varsities, where I saw myself when I did engineering, you're not really exposed to subjects that help you understand emotions, understand yourself as a person, where in other fields you get that sort of education. How do you build that within yourself? So you spoke a bit about, being aware of yourself, understanding where your passions lie. Any advice you can give on that?
That's actually one of the things that I would like to see incorporated a little bit more in the STEM fields when it comes to studies at all levels. There needs to be a sense of psychology. You know how they make it mandatory for us to do modules that we probably will never use, but just because we are in first year, we have to do it. Something like that, where everyone, yeah, like everyone needs to know how to deal with their emotions, how to process their feelings, how to look at life objectively. There needs to be that kind of module because essentially you're just turning us into robots at the end of the day. We need to be able to be equipped with those essential life skills. And it's nothing major. It wouldn't even require a major change on the part of the university. Just add those two modules, maybe for your entire undergraduate degree, you do two modules in psychology. You can even choose which ones you want to do and just have some component of humanity in the STEM field. I didn't have that, unfortunately. And how I would, what I would suggest to people to get a little bit more in tune with that is to educate yourself, read books, have conversations with your friends beyond just what are you doing this weekend. Like, one of the questions now that ultimately is such a simple question, but it's so deep, people don't realize they just do it subconsciously is when I see you somewhere and I ask you, how are you doing? I'm not asking that question hoping that you will genuinely answer me with everything that you're going through and you're feeling. It is more just a polite way of saying hi and I'm acknowledging you. But that is such a deep question to ask someone like, how are you doing? I don't think we understand the depth of that question. Like when me and like my closest friend from university is more like a brother at this point. When I ask him how he's doing, he knows exactly what I mean when I ask. And the conversation will go on for an hour or 2 hours just based off of one question. And when we ask that in our normal day to day, it's more just a pleasantry. It's a way to say, I see you, I'm here, you are here, we have acknowledged each other. But for me, beyond just being able to talk to my friends on a deeper level, I took the time to educate myself on that. I read books about Stoicism, um, the Ryan Holiday Everyday Stoic, the Daily Stoic, something like that. The other book that I read from Stephen Covey, The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, Jordan Peterson, The 12 Rules of Life, The Richest Man in Babylon, more about personal finance, The Power of the Subconscious Mind. Like things like that is what I took upon myself for education because in order for you to identify areas in your life that you need to improve, you need to be honest enough with yourself to realize where you're lacking. And like you're saying, going through university, I have all of this technical expertise, but then I actually realized on a human level all of the lack that I still have. So I then made a conscious decision to say, okay, I need to improve in all these other aspects. I'm going to university and I'm learning all these technical things and I'm improving there. But beyond that, I need to learn how to navigate life itself. And that's when I started reading. The first book I picked up was The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. And it just went from there. So you have to take a responsibility for your life. Nobody is going to come and dictate to you the things that you should do. You are the only one in charge. And you have to be honest with yourself enough. So if you ask yourself these questions, you need to be honest enough and not lie to yourself. And once you've established areas in your life that you need to work on, then actually do something about it. You don't have to necessarily go and read an entire book. You can go on YouTube and ask questions. You can even ask ChatGPT some questions about things. But eventually that seed will be planted and everything will flow from there. So just take that first step in realizing that there's so much more to learn still in life. And ultimately, we are students until the day we die. So I would encourage people to just start somewhere. If you ask your friend, just explain to me some things that you're struggling with on a daily basis. Ask genuine, honest questions, then actually listen to them. It'll spark an entire different level of friendship that you never knew was there. So before you even go to a book, use the resources that's around you, your family, your friends. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's also starting at the level at which you are. You know, if a good example I like to think of is Lionel Messi. When he was born, he could not walk himself as well. He was just like you when you were a baby. But over time, you develop the skills, and he's, went on to become one of the greatest players. It's, you're not going to become the master the first moment you try something. You have to just do the simplest thing that you can. If you're trying to run a marathon, you're not going to start just by going and running the marathon. No, you build up to it. It's a build up. And there are so many resources out there to help you. Like you said, there's books, there's videos. Like YouTube literally has millions and millions and millions of videos on just about anything. Like YouTube is not just for leisure, it's basically the search engine equivalent for videos at this point. And then ChatGPT can be your assistant. If you want to work on something, like if you want to read a book on something you were struggling with, you literally have something there you can ask. Hey, ChatGPT, I'm struggling with XYZ. Can you recommend a book for me? And then it's taking action. You have to actually take accountability for yourself, for your own actions, not placing yourself in this role of a victim, that I am this person and I will always be this person. I can't change things. You have to have faith that you can be more. There is potential with you, there's potential inherent in you. All of us, I believe, have a greater potential that many of us don't realize, but it's only through taking action on your own. Like, nobody's going to read the books for you. Like, sure, somebody could actually read it for you, but you have to be the one to take action on everything that you learn in the book. If you don't want to read, there's audiobooks. It is literally somebody reading the book for you, but it doesn't take away, the need that you have to get up off your bum, go and take action.
Yeah. No, Jordan Peterson says that in order to learn something new or become good at something, you need to accept that you'll be a fool at first. But if you don't do it at all, if you do nothing at all, you are an even bigger fool.
Yeah, it's that humility to accept that, you know, I am not good at this, but I will become better through doing it repeatedly. And I think the gym is one of the best places you can see it because literally, if you just go regularly and you lift weights routinely, there is no ways in hell you are not going to get stronger. Like, the other thing with gym is it's the one place where you can actually get a preview of your results. You know, you actually get a pump. So then you can see how you'll look in 3 months without the pump. You know, you get the preview of the investment you are making.
That's so true, man. You actually see your future. The gym is probably one of the few places in the world whereby everyone who's in that building, they have made a conscious decision to improve their lives. Everyone is there in the pursuit of a better, healthier, fitter life. Everyone. Now, we may have some people there who's maybe they're looking for a woman to hit on or whatever the case may be. At the end of the day, they're still going to pick up a weight and do something. So, everyone is there at different levels in their journey, but they have made the decision to strive towards improvement. Besides for a library, there's probably few other places where you'd go in there and you can see that everyone is here is in the pursuit of knowledge, of wisdom, of strength, generally improvement in life. And it's one of those things where you're not going to see results today, you're not going to see results tomorrow, you won't see it in the week, but maybe within a month or in 2 months, you'll see the results, what you put in today. So it also teaches you that aspect of delayed gratification. you know I've started recently started educating myself with regards to investing and just general financial habits for young adults and stuff like that. So I came across this post. I don't know from where it is exactly. Someone posted it on Instagram, but they had a graph, right, going back, let's say, the last 20 or 30 years, and it had the gains of the S&P 500 on there, and they compared that to another index. So this person made a different index, and the companies that they put in that index, the CEOs of those companies were people who are known to have been avid gym goers, right? So he made an index comparing companies where the CEOs go to the gym versus the S&P 500. And that index outperformed the S&P 500 by a large extent. So I don't know what that says. I'm not giving anyone financial advice, but it just shows the correlation is there, between investing within yourself physically and in your health and performance.
Yeah, if I have to just make like a quick analysis or something I would be curious to see is if their success in the S&P 500 is more down to the personality of those CEOs, that they are more what's the word I'm looking for, more conscientious as opposed to the ones that don't go to the gym. um yeah, and again, like going to the gym and also going to the library, it's lowering the barrier for yourself, putting yourself in places that are conducive to your growth, to what it is you want to achieve, who you want to become. Having the right people around you, people that support you, people that want to see you be the best you can be. Jordan Peterson, another chapter in his book, have friends that want the best for you. That is a fundamental thing. Like, it's all well and good having fun with friends, going out, having fun and doing things. But there comes a point where you look back and then you're like, what am I actually getting out of this? How do I feel like once the partying is done? and we sit down with each other and there's that lull. Do you really feel like you want to be in these people's presence?
Exactly. If the only time you hang out with your friends is when you are engaging in activities that actually distracts you guys from actually having open communication, then you probably, need to consider the depth at which, your friendships are at. And it's fine to have those kinds of friends, but those can't be your only friends. Some people will have friends that they can go out and have fun with, but then you also have other friends where you go and you can actually sit down and talk to and have, a different type of friendship with that. So if all of your friends are of the one kind, then it's probably not good for your personal development.
Yeah, and there's this metric like one of the best things for your health is not going to gym, it's not exercising regularly, it's not nutrition, it's having close relationships. Like the golden number, I think, is 5. Anything above that becomes more taxing and draining and takes more investment. Anything less than that, it's like you're kind of in your own. And that number, it's 5, but it's not like a dead set number. It's 5 quality relationships, and typically with that number, the way they look at it, it's also just family relationships. Like it doesn't always have to just be friendships or whatever. It's family relationships, it's relationship with friends, it's romantic relationships. So with that model, they say like a romantic partners too because of the time investment, you know. And we are social beings. Like we evolved not to survive on our own. Like if you look at animals, and the ones that tend to be more on their own are more like wolves, canines, or cats. The more evolved they become, the more they like us. So you go towards chimps, you go to gorillas. They are all social beings. Even the way we raise our young is a lot more social than any other animal. The male stays around after the child is born. Most species, they go off on their own. And it's finding this balance between, being yourself and working on yourself, but also realizing that you are not on your own. A war is never won by a single soldier, it's the whole army.
Yeah, even in the 7 habits of highly effective people, one of the habits that Stephen Covey says is don't strive to be an independent person, but rather strive to be an interdependent person. And the social narrative of current day and age is independence. Men are saying that we can do this on our own. We don't necessarily need women, and women are saying that we don't need men. So at our core, like you said, the quality of our lives is mostly determined by the number of quality friendships that we have. And if at the same time we have this kind of social narrative that we don't need anyone, then it doesn't kind of come as a surprise that the societal happiness or quality of life index has kind of gone down. And this is something that we only realize later in life. And I think the older you get, probably the more difficult it is to establish new quality friendships because people become set in their lives. It becomes more routine. You start doing more of the same things and being more explorative as you get married, you have kids, and your responsibilities shift. So it's definitely something that if you don't prioritize it, or if it's not something you consciously do in your youth, and then you may likely suffer from that, towards the end. And by then, hopefully, it's not too late when that realization hits. So start prioritizing your friendships. One thing that I was having a conversation with my friend the other day, and I was telling them that I got this one from Chris Williamson, where whenever I think of one of my friends, I always send them a message. Say, hey man, I thought about you. I hope you're doing well. Let me know when you're free for a call or whatever. We don't talk every day, we don't talk every 2 weeks, but we talk, so there's that. initiative that if you don't work on the thing that you say is valuable to you, then how valuable is it really? So I genuinely make that effort to message my friends when I thought about them. And I mean, if I got a message from my friend just randomly saying, "Hey man, I thought about you today. Let me know when you're up for a call," it would my mood would go up. And it speaks to the fact that your quality of life is determined by that. I love my friends. And although we don't speak to each other often because we're all, doing life on our own terms, we all have our own things going on, we do check in with each other once in a while and ask those tough questions and let each other know that, man, I know you're going through all of this, but if you ever need, to talk, there's something you're going through, I'm here. And I think it's really important to know that when you're going through tough times in life, that there are people that you can call, that you can rely on for some help. Because although you can probably get through things yourself, having friends or people in the corner will probably make the process a lot more easier. And why would you choose the hard path?
Hmm. Yeah, it's, there's two natural states for anything in the universe, it's growth and atrophy. So either something is growing or it is dying. And it's the same with humans. Our body grows till a certain point, I think till like 35, 40, and then you start decaying slowly. Anything in nature. And, there's, like for yourself, the way you can stave off aging is by routinely exercising. To preserve anything requires effort. If you want a building to look good for many, many years, it needs maintenance. But if you want it to die out, just leave it on its own there. It will naturally decay over time. And it's the same with relationships. There was a video I saw yesterday, a Jubilee video, where they asked guys to just call up a friend and tell them, I love you. And we have in our minds that this is such an odd thing. We thinking the other person's going to think it's weird, so we don't do it, even though we might feel it and we want to do it. But when the guys did it, the other guy on the other end was so blown away by it, and they didn't say, "No, man, you're being weird," except for the one guy. But even the one guy that said, "Man, that's gay," he immediately said, "I love you too." You know, like runs that drives it home that there's this where we might think something is weird, but until you actually do it, you'll see how much somebody truly appreciates it. That might make somebody's day. Because what's the opposite? You never tell that to somebody. We all keep it all closed up, and then one day you find out, oh, he killed himself. Why? I should have done something. Having that regret hurts a lot more than that discomfort from actually saying something to the person or reaching out.
I fully agree. I once, in the group chat that I had with my friends from university, and I just woke up this one day feeling a bit nostalgic, feeling appreciative of the friends that I have because going through masters and PhD can be a very isolating journey, especially if you do it in a place far from your hometown and your parents and that close friendship that you've developed, since primary and high school. So the social community that you have when you're doing your postgraduate degree is essentially the people around you who's doing the same thing that you're doing. So they become your friends. And I was just thinking about how it would practically have been impossible for me to finish if it was not, for them being there. Those times where you would maybe just go for a drink or you just have a laugh, you go out of the lab, you go sit in the sun outside and you just talk, you just vent. Like those moments are priceless. So I just woke up one day and I thought, I'm thinking about this, but do they actually know that this is the impact that they had on my life? So I sent a message in the group chat, just expressing, my appreciation for them and telling them that I love them. And then one by one, they started calling me, asking me if I'm okay. They were worrying if I'm gonna hurt myself, and I was like, nah, 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 nah. It's nothing like that. I just wanted to let you know how I feel, and there's nothing else going on. I just wanted to let you know. And in that moment, you have a heartfelt conversation because expressing that level of vulnerability to them kind of shows to them that it's okay for them to be that way as well. And now you are fostering a healthy relationship, where we can be actually sensitive about our feelings and tell each other that we love each other and tell each other that we appreciate each other. So it's weird that as soon as we start expressing that, out of the blue, because it's not something that we do often, we would always think, is everything okay? Like, what's going on here? Like, so it just shows that there's this wall up, that we need to actively break down. Like, we need to be the versions of ourselves that we want to see in the world. So start with your friends, start with your family.
Okay, I think that's a great place to end things off. Ladies and gentlemen, Randy Cunningham.
Thanks
Yeah,
for
if
having
people
me,
want
man.
to connect with you, follow things you're doing, where can they go?
Find me on LinkedIn, pop me a message.
Hmm.
My name is Randy Cunningham. You'll find me. Hit me up, Facebook, Instagram, wherever you can find me. I always respond to people.
Hmm. Really appreciate you, man. Thank you for doing this episode. And yeah, it's always nice catching up and chatting with each other again.
All good, man. I'll see you soon.